Hello. We're sharing here about a topic which is saving the earth from extinction. It's not a usual topic of Vardankar. Well, I'm going to introduce Heather G, whose spiritual name is Ga Shaiza, or Shaiji, and my name is Sean. Welcome to this talk.
Thank you, Sean. My name is Shaiji, and I want to reiterate that, again, this is not a normal topic about Vardankar, which is the ancient science of out-of-body soul or Tusa travel to the different heavenly planes to return home. If you want to see more about the actual teachings, you can actually look at our other over 250 videos, documentaries, as well as books that goes into the actual topic of what this path is about. But instead, rather, today we're going to talk about something different. And I was even hesitant about bringing this topic up because it's so out of the box, you could say.
Of course, a lot of people are going to find this hard to believe. So it sounds too paranormal. But probably the people who believe it will already be people who lean towards spirituality.
Yeah, really, people have to prove it for themselves. They can ask the ancient masters, they can seek guidance from the Vardan to give them proof, and it will give them proof if they're patient. It was brought to my attention that there were individuals that were associating with a recent book that I put out with something negative or even political. And I clarified that it's nothing of the sort like that. The book is called The Secrets of Ceres, an ancient past life on a planet with two suns called Ceres. And it's actually a book that is about spirituality. Spirituality and soul projection, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with politics or space politics of any kind. It wasn't then, but other times too. I had the realization, the same realization that I've had a number of times years ago, where it felt as though every step forward that I took, I would immediately be counteracted or sabotaged. And when I finished writing the series book many years ago, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I suddenly noticed this book appeared called The Series Agenda, written by a different author named Scott Lamiel. And the initial knowingness that I got from Soul suddenly was, well, first I should explain that his book is fiction. And my book, The Secrets of Ceres, is non-fiction. It's an actual past life that both myself and my former husband in spirit, Alan G, had together. But when I looked up his book, it was apparently written several years prior to my book. And then I read some of it, and I actually felt very upset, even a little bit agitated and angry. Because from a sense of knowingness, it almost felt like this was some form of sabotage. I would call to arrange to be a speaker at a conference in Mount Shasta, and they would say, "Oh, your book, your topic is exactly like Scott Lamiel's topic," and I'd be like, sorry, no, there's no relation whatsoever. Maybe he wasn't conscious of it in his conscious mind, but it felt as if someone was intentionally trying to sabotage me by associating me with something that had nothing to do with my book. His book was called The Series Agenda, but it was really his agenda. And his agenda had to do with politics, and his agenda had to do with counteracting or stopping people in negative polarity. Basically, in his fictional book, he was bringing back the series from the dead, from their extinct planet, into the current times, and pretending that they had this political agenda, his agenda, and they had this special ray or device that would, against people's in the negative polarity's will, transform them into something they didn't want to be transformed into positive or whatever. And immediately when I saw this, I thought to myself, oh no, someone is trying to associate me with this so-called agenda that has absolutely nothing to do with the series. This man knew very, very little about the series. You could tell that he didn't have any past lives there. He didn't really know or understand the culture. He was guessing, and he was making this fictional piece, and I was being associated with it. Well, suddenly I had just had the realization, it wasn't just with this, it was many things, where that someone was interfering with my timeline. Someone who, how can I put it, every time I did something, someone would interject in the timeline to do something that completely counteracted whatever I did. If I wrote a book, all of a sudden there was another book to make my book look bad. If I gave a talk, immediately beforehand, before I even gave the talk or before I even wrote the book, someone else would give some kind of talk or book that would completely counteract whatever work I was doing. It might remind you a little bit of that film Doctor Strange, where he can project into time and then try to change the timeline to stop someone from doing something. It was sabotage, basically. And I suddenly had this realization that there were these beings, I suppose you could call them aliens, who had this technology of time travel. And over again, they would try to block or stop me, or stop Alan G, or attack us in different ways, to try to make Vardankar fail. And the reason, it was extreme warfare. I mean, when Vardankar first came out publicly, we were under such severe attack. They were trying to completely destroy us. We had these black magicians who were attacking us, but I didn't know fully from Soul that it was also these aliens. They could get into people's heads and motivate them, trick them into attacking us. And the reason for this was that these aliens, because they have this time travel ability similar to Doctor Strange, they projected into the future and they saw that Earth would go extinct. And they also saw that Vardankar, because it grew to a certain size, it prevented that extinction. So that they realized from time traveling and seeing this future, they had the realization, they realized that if they were going to steal the planet for themselves away from those who are living here or lead it now, that they had to destroy Vardankar and destroy Alan G and myself and now Sean, in order to change the timeline. And so they kept jumping into my timeline or Alan G's timeline and going back into the past whenever we made any progress with Vardankar to make sure that we failed each time. Because they lost their planet and they wanted to acquire this planet for themselves. And because the karma was so extreme and so severe from ancient Atlantis, this was one of the ways in which the extinction karma could be overcome. That's not to say that there isn't going to be some kind of cleansing that happens where many people are leaving, but total extinction is not a good thing.
Yeah, and it's also important to point out that this is not about humans versus reptilians. I know
No.
some people might interpret it that way, but this is a different race of beings that have been circling the earth. And in my viewpoint, they play games on people. They've done a lot of things, and they can go back in time quite a ways. And this allows them to interfere quite a bit. And this brings up the next point about interference, and how they get away with it is how they've gotten consent from people unconsciously, or they believe they have, but the karmic consequences, the karma is worse when you do things towards someone without consent.
Yeah.
Even if you have consent, there's still going to be some karma because it's not even real consent. But you kind of brought up this you discovered, or we kind of discovered this declaration of non-consent, which is a declaration that they can't do that.
Yes. And also another thing I should bring up too is one of the reasons that Alan G became so deathly sick is because of this interference in the timeline, where they would jump into the timeline and exasperate his health conditions. Or for myself, they were trying to do things like criminalize me, make me look like some kind of problem, and they would do that by actually making a piece of evidence appear that didn't exist. We would be staying at a hotel and suddenly an object would appear, not near us but another place, and it was these people's intentions to create false pretenses to try to turn the Chilas against me, the students against me, to try to turn the government against me, to try to turn different individuals against me, because they wanted to acquire this planet, and they knew that Vardankar, growing bigger, I mean a lot bigger, like we were told on the inner planes, over 2 million persons, would counteract this extreme karma from Atlantis. But also one of the reasons why we suffered so tremendously, why we experienced like the enormous warfare where, oh my God, it was like such extreme warfare, because they wanted the planet for themselves. They wanted that the current leaders, or the current beings on this planet who are leaders, and as well as people, would lose their planet so that they could acquire it. And they're a completely different race that is not in charge of Earth at all right now. But they want to be. And one of the ways in which they were going to do that was by destroying Vardankar, destroying myself, destroying Alan G, destroying Sean, so that they could acquire it. Because they knew that Vardankar was offsetting this enormous karmic burden, and we were actually suffering a lot, working out a lot of the ancient karma for Atlantis, which is one of the reasons why we experienced this massive black magic attack when Vardankar first came out, meaning like the first year, a number of years, there were black magicians in their past lives in the Middle Ages, and they were these beings who were, I guess, ETs, were mentally influencing these people to try to destroy us. Their first step was they wanted to take Alan out. They wanted to destroy his lower bodies. They did everything they could to try to destroy him physically, because they did not want Vardankar to be successful, because they knew that we were there as a help to the leaders and a help to those living on this planet for this form of protection. My name means mercy, and it's giving, basically, the Vardan, divine spirit, this light and sound of God, is giving mercy so that this enormous karma and mistakes that leaders in the past and in the present have made can be somewhat offset so that it is not destroyed. The destruction of Atlantis was severe, and this was basically like divine intervention to prevent the total destruction that was destined to happen. The ancient ones, such as Varden Masters and Silent Ones, never intervene in things like politics and world events unless there's going to be something very extreme, like people are going to totally destroy themselves and everything else. In a situation like that, they'll step in and help out.
And you bring up a point about how they create division. Aside from targeting Vardankar and other people, I think Vardankar became a major target.
Yeah.
But they also create division. Because, it's like divide and conquer. It speeds up the destruction or the extinction of the planet. When they pit people versus governments, governments versus people, and they create all kinds of issues, and they make it look like it's coming from that person or that government, and so on. When really, their influence, they can influence your health, they can create bad luck, they can influence projects, accidents, delays, dreams, all kinds of things like that. They can create divisive roles.
And then if you have success, then they interject in the timeline something that completely counteracts your success, so it looks like you never had success to begin with.
Right.
Or another one of the tricks that was used on me a lot. So not only do they have time control technology where they can interject in the timeline to destroy success, but also they have a way of getting into people's heads. I don't know if you call it thought control technology, I don't know what you would call it. But for some people, they would get this large group of people to focus on creating a very powerful reality that I'm a criminal. I mean, they would try to criminalize me. And they would actually even manifest objects to try to support that reality. And they would interject thought forms in people's minds to make them believe that. And they would also do that with the Vardankar students. They would actually project the reality so strongly into people's minds, Chila's minds, that I am this weak, spiritually inept person who's unable to do certain things spiritually. And they would believe this so powerfully that it would affect me. I'd call someone on the phone, this one individual on the phone. These beings had projected this reality in this person's mind. And when I would call them on the phone, I would be tripping all over myself. I wouldn't even be able to speak with clarity or to help them. Whereas when I talked on the phone with somebody else spiritually, all of this light and sound would come through, and all of these insights and awarenesses would come through to them, and gifts, and they would feel uplifted and a spiritual quickening, and suddenly their spiritual life would be activated and enlivened and filled with joy. And they would get questions answered that they hadn't known the answer to for years. But the reason I'm bringing that up is this individual who had the negative viewpoint, they ended up having this inner collapse, and they ended up they couldn't even stay in Vardankar because they had committed so many transgressions against me and against the Varden. It was like they had become a cow channel. But the reason I bring this is because I had entire groups of people that were projecting like dark realities at me, so that even like I was making videos that were flowing from the Varden, but then all of a sudden I would make videos where I would just mess up completely because of these low expectations. But the reason I'm sharing this is one of the methods that they used. By influencing people's view of reality of a person, like Atlantis. The magicians of Atlantis, if they saw that person as a problem, they would paint a negative reality about that person, so that people would see that person, instead of being this magnificent, vast spiritual being, they would see only limitation. They would see only problems. So when people would see me as a problem, I'd end up tripping, making mistakes that were problems because people were projecting that reality at me very strongly, which is black magic, basically. It's black magic. And they had people projecting this kind of black magic at Alan G. and myself, but in different ways.
So the bottom line is that these beings are intelligent, they have big brains, they're very powerful psychic criminals, and they use technology of some kind. And they can, like I said, they can go back in time and create traps and obstacles that are difficult. And some people will just fail. This is at a lower level, I guess, but it's something that has to be resolved and rectified. One has to stop giving consent, certainly, and not even allow Earth leaders to represent them for that consent, because that's false consent, unless you agree to it.
When I had this realization that I was getting this outside interference, similar to that film, both Alan G. and I getting this interference, and Sean, of time travel, beings that were capable of time travel, who, every time I put something out, would counteract it with something to nullify what I was doing or stop what I was doing. Even to the point of getting into other people's heads, the heads of humans, to cause blocking bank accounts and locking us out of our YouTube channel and things like this. Or blocking my phone so I couldn't talk to Chilas to rescue them when they were being steered in the wrong direction. Things like that. But the point I'm getting to is that recently, when I had the realization this was happening below the surface, the Varden showed me, and I had a sense of knowingness to communicate with these beings that they're making a mistake. That, in fact, them being able to receive the kind of planet that they want because they lost their planet could be done in another way. Instead of trying to perpetuate and cause an extinction by interfering and stopping Vardankar from growing larger, which would prevent the extinction event. Instead, they could right the wrong that they did and prove to the universe, prove to God, prove to the negative power, whomever, that they could be responsible by reversing the enormous damage that they did. By reversing the intention of this extinction, they would prove that they're more worthy and responsible like a spiritual adult instead of an immature spiritual child. And in that sense, this Varden, this force of light and sound throughout the universe, would show them how they can resolve their situation. They would be shown. And I'll give you an example. There were times when Alan G. and I were in situations that were so severe and so detrimental that it felt almost hopeless. That a normal person would not have been able to survive or get through it. But it was almost like walking on water. One door would shut and another door would open by divine spirit. And so it's the same with them. If they are responsible, instead of doors being shut in their face, a door will be opened that will help them. But they have to prove that they're responsible. And one of the ways they can prove it is by reversing the damage that they've done towards Vardankar. By doing a reversal.
And instead of blocking it, actually helping in some way.
Helping it to reach the... Basically, both Sean and I were told on the internet, and Petterzesk, Paul J. Twitchell said this too. He said that if... It's kind of depressing when you hear the works of Nostradamus. He predicted some dire things. But... And yes, there may be certain things that occur that may be challenging, but total extinction, everybody loses everything, like people lost in Atlantis, can be prevented. And both Sean and I when we went into contemplation with Divine Spirit, we were told that over 2 million people becoming Vardanists would basically counteract and stop this extinction event from happening on Earth. And I realize that sounds self-serving, so all I have to say related to that is, if somebody doesn't know if this is true or not, it's like the saying, prove it for yourself. Meaning, you can ask these ancient Vardan masters, you can contemplate with Divine Spirit to see if this is true.
Right.
Of course, you have to be careful that certain beings don't intervene and pretend to give you the answer, because that happens a lot on the astral plane.
It happens a lot with, especially these beings who would want to inherit the planet. They often create illusions of getting a knowingness. It's happened many times, actually. Even when we were traveling and different things, I noticed, something didn't feel right. Yeah. And so I was getting a pretend knowingness, yeah. And then I had to go deeper and contact Fubi Kwans, who is the living Vardan master, and Heather G is the outer master. But I had to go deeper because they try to convince you that they can give you a blaring signal in one direction.
Yeah.
And you can go into how they do that. I don't know if they use implants or whatever. People talk about implants and stuff like that. I don't know all the methods they use, but they have they're very powerful psychic beings, and I guess probably older than the average human. Probably not. They probably live a long time. Well, anyway, as Heather G said, as you said, they probably lost their planet, and so Earth is like they're salivating and waiting for humans to go extinct, and they're yeah. helping it along.
Yeah.
By getting this false consent and creating problems and divisiveness between people and governments and all these things. And it's not to say that there aren't people doing that too. I think some of them might be influenced by these beings, and some of them just might have their own reasons for doing that. But I'd say that this alien influence is pretty terrible and making things a lot worse, or has been, and things might be changing right now because of what's happening, because this breakthrough in understanding this. Because before, whenever we would think maybe it's the government doing this, and we had kind of the wrong concept a little bit, and yeah. It would create more problems, and there was almost like it was confusing, a little bit confusing. But as soon as we realized this, things kind of changed overnight and became different. Like, I never felt that way in a
heaviness
long time.
Went away. Like a feeling of ominous heaviness went away.
And it was almost like, wait a minute, that was it. And there was all this freedom all of a sudden from this prison of they create these. And then we were, making more contact with some of them, and I realized some of them are very intelligent, and they got it right away when we communicated to them, and they understood, and they actually changed their flow immediately it's from hurting to helping. And those are the ones that maybe do more time travel. They would go back in time and create things like that other series agenda book.
Yeah.
They would go back in time and influence that instead of directly attacking, because they're smarter and they know that directly attacking it will make them lose their intelligence.
Yeah.
They're a lot smarter that way. But then there are some that are a little bit slower, and so I still can sense those kind of like attacking, but it's like the ones who have done more attacking directly, and they'll manifest something more directly in your space to hurt you, or like a more direct attack, and they're a little bit slower to get the point of this non-consent and then the karmic repercussions of that. So
yeah, that's a very good insight. Also, another thing too is that mention related to 2 million persons in Vardankar. It's not like religion where you just want bodies. It's more or less only individuals that truly and sincerely are genuinely interested in the path and genuinely interested in using out-of-body tusa or soul projection to return home. and to develop themselves and reach self-realization and God-realization and Vardan mastership. This is not something where just anyone can join it as a religion and then things are solved. Yeah, everything's better because, somebody just, reads a book once a month or something, or it's nothing like that. And also another thing is, again, it's like Peter's said many times, which is prove it. If you don't believe this, or you think this sounds like it doesn't make sense, one can prove it for themselves. One can go on the inner and just confide in any of these masters and seek guidance to see if this is true. Ask for evidence, ask for proof, and it will be shown to you. See if Divine Spirit will show you proof, and it will be shown to you. And if individuals feel guided to help Vardankar so that we can reach this goal, especially Chelas, to reach this important goal, one can help and seek inner guidance as to how that can be done. Something as simple as sharing our links, our video links, is something that can help. One thing that also startled me, or that I found strange and interesting, was when, in reflecting upon the black magic attacks that both Alan G and I were experiencing in such enormous severity in the early years of Vardankar, Divine Spirit, the Vardan, told me, which kind of surprised me, that we were working off some of this world karma from ancient Atlantis, the severity of it, which is why we were suffering so greatly. But it wasn't just us. There were other people on Earth who were also helping, who were suffering, going through difficulties, painful situations, working off this ancient Atlantis black magic karma to not just a planetary karma, but also helping individuals who otherwise would experience extreme losses, like they did in Atlantis.
So it's not all aliens. Some of it's karma.
Some of it, well, yeah, some of the reasons for the attacks has to do with working off this karma.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, many people are working off karma and also taking on other people's karma. So there's karma, and how does one know the difference between alien interference and just someone's karma? That might be an important thing to touch on.
Well, it could be the same thing.
It can be.
It can be the same thing. Sometimes what looks like evil, what looks like an evil circumstance or evil situation, is actually something that was destined to occur. Mm-hmm. And in ancient Atlantis, one of the things the black magicians did was they sometimes would, persons who they saw as a problem, they would create a negative reality about that person to try to undermine them, such as, criminalize the individual or make someone look like they're weak and ineffective and no good, things like that.
Instead of a direct attack, it would be more effective to discredit someone. Because then they just lose faith. Everyone loses faith in the leader, yada yada yada.
And that's what they attempted to do with me and Alan. With Alan G, they were trying to destroy him by his physical body. And they did that by jumping into the timeline and causing illness, or they knew he had heart failure, so they would jump into a timeline and insert something that would cause him extreme stress on his heart, so that he would, have more of a breakdown. And for myself, the attacks were like the smearing campaign. They would try to get people to try to get them to criminalize me, or try to get Chelas or others to see me as empty-headed, weak, not capable spiritually, to try to implant those ideas to disillusion them so that they would create that reality. And I'd literally try to give a talk, and my talk would just completely get messed up because of that. because of people projecting this reality. It was like black magic. It's kind of like if you've ever had like a teacher, like a, what do you call it, like a math teacher in third grade who didn't believe in you. And like every time you were in their class, you felt weaker, you felt you were having trouble even doing your equations or your math because their expectations were so low. Low expectations is like almost a form of black magic to trip someone up. And I should mention this as a side note, really. I should mention this as a side note, is that some individuals are just... There's Fubi Quans. Fubi Quans is the Mahatma, the Living Mormon Master. He is a divine being of great wisdom and awareness. And so are the ancient Vardan masters, like Rebazar Taurus and Yabul Sakabi. They're great, magnificent beings. But there's a very clear misunderstanding among some chelas, not all of them, because some chelas were doing extraordinarily well, like Leonard, who reached his 10th initiation, God realization initiation, or other chelas who reached self-realization. But there are some chelas who created this who were influenced with this reality that I'm just an ordinary interim master, sort of like this transient person who's just there to hold space. And one of the things that they don't realize was that I was destined to play an important role, whether they realize that or not. And from the very beginning, it was almost like they wanted to push me out of the way because they didn't realize that, for instance, when the Hugh chose Nai Daza, Alanji, to be the living Vardan Master, some people looked at his lower bodies, that he was overweight, that he was terribly sick, that he had this boisterous personality that almost seemed obnoxious to them. And they saw him as nothing. They saw him as this person is just an annoying kind of problem person, and they couldn't see from the level of soul. And for me personally, it's the same thing. My lower bodies were a distraction to some individuals because they couldn't see that the Hurei chose me for certain reasons. I had certain training or certain background for a reason. And at one point, I felt really hurt because beings were only, how can I say, the definition of evil is that which takes something great and makes it very small. And when beings were trying to project a reality at me that I was very, very weak and small and incompetent, and held that in their consciousness like a form of black magic against me, and I started to feel small, and I started to trip over myself like I was weak, and would make mistakes in some of my talks out of the 200 and something. But there was not the realization that I'm not just an ordinary interim Vardan Master. I was sent for a reason. When I was hurt and disillusioned this way, I contemplated, and the Vardan, the voice of God, told me that it doesn't, regarding what I was experiencing as beings underestimating me or creating false conclusions about me as a teacher. And I was told by the Vardan, this voice of God, that it doesn't care about lower bodies, that it only wants soul to return to it. And that's important.
I guess I've heard it though from some Vardanists. They're just waiting for another master, like who's the real master coming next, and they don't even realize how lucky they are, how blessed they are to have Fubi Quans and you. I mean, Fubi Quans is millenniums old. As a living Vardan master, we're very blessed, and I don't think people realize how blessed they are.
How lucky they are.
They don't. And they also have the benefit of you on the outer. And so they actually have two Vardan masters that they can lean on. People don't know how blessed they are, really, but...
Fubi Quans is He's a being with a vast state of consciousness. He is a being that has very deep, profound wisdom, vast understanding about the spiritual universes.
Sorry. People need to put more trust in Fubi as well as you.
And myself, I've had many past lives as a Vardan master on different planets, as well as an inner circle higher initiate, not just on Earth, but on many different planets. And so is Alanji. And some people took Alanji for granted too. Like, we would have a seminar, and a person was sometimes given a choice. Would they go to the seminar? They were given a choice. Would they go to a job training that they could miss if they wanted to? It wasn't that important. Or to get some additional information. Or could they go to the seminar to see Alanji? There was one individual who chose to go to the job training instead. And then she didn't realize that that was the last seminar that he gave. And so when we take someone for granted, like some people just ignore Fobiquans or they don't give him much attention. When we take someone for granted and we don't appreciate them, then we miss the opportunity. And when we underestimate somebody and project a lower expectation of reality, we're also limiting ourselves.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but if one doesn't use their knowingness, then I don't think there'll be someone who would even recognize a Vardan master if they see them in person. Even one of the ancient masters.
Exactly.
Because they expect them to be a god in the physical form, like,
Yeah.
glowing or something like that.
Yeah.
But
To
I
walk
think,
on water, to glow, to have
well, we turn them into
demigod.
celebrities in a sense,
Yeah.
but they are not just ordinary humans, true. But you might not notice it without using a strong knowingness. You might not know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, the masses usually can't recognize the Vardan master. Only those who have a certain level of spiritual advancement or spiritual development. My former teacher on another planet many lifetimes ago, Naitomo, once said that if an individual was just filled with doubts towards him as the master, or if an individual didn't have a level of knowingness that he was their teacher, then he concluded that they didn't have enough spiritual advancement to be in the path to begin with, that they weren't ready for it. And Alanji likewise said that if someone is too filled with negativity and they have too many doubts in the master and too many doubts in themselves, then they're going to just have to wait because they're not really ready. And this is true because knowingness is an indication of spiritual development, spiritual advancement.
Yeah, if people put their full trust in the Magatma, then they'll be amazed at what can be done.
Yeah.
But people have to put their best foot forward. And Vardanists should just focus on being Vardanists, not waiting for a new master.
And also putting their faith in both the Magatma and the Outer Master.
Yeah.
Because there's some individuals, they have this illusion that when Alanji was alive, they believed that they could just ignore Alanji and they could do really well. But that was an illusion. And they have there are some individuals that have that attitude about me, that they can just ignore me or be like rude and arrogant and put themselves on a high horse, and that's perfectly fine. But in reality, that's not okay. But getting back to what we were talking about before, because we diverged a little bit, I was startled, actually. I was a little startled when all of a sudden, all these years we've experienced all of this spiritual warfare and attacks and people like manifesting things to, like even evidence to try to attack me or criminalize me or destroy Vardankar or destroy our health and all this stuff. And to finally be shown by divine spirit, this voice of God, that there were these aliens had actually gone to the future in the timeline, saw that Vardankar stopped the extinction, and they literally were doing everything imaginable, like all-out warfare, to try to destroy us, because they wanted to basically steal this planet from the leaders of this planet, from the people of the planet. And Vardankar was going to prevent that, because there was a grace, basically grace.
And they wanted to sever all positive ties that Vardankar has to anyone or try to interfere.
Including students. Any student that would try to be of service, to serve. They would be, their confidence in me or in Phobiquans or in the path would be attacked, to try to disillusion them, to take them out of their spiritual center, to try to destroy their faith in Vardankar, to try to destroy their faith in the Master, to try to basically, so that we couldn't take any steps to move forward, because any person that would try to help would be, their mind would be undermined. They would project these realities, and then when I would do any steps to try to move forward with Vardankar, I would be blocked. If I tried to give a talk, then all of a sudden another talk would appear that would somehow try to undermine everything that I spoke about. Or if I did a book like Secrets of Ceres, suddenly another book would appear.
Or there was an interview where one right before you, it just seemed like it was misplaced.
Yeah.
Or placed there.
It was it was like injected in the timeline.
And then they end up getting like 4 million views, and that was the most views they got.
Ever.
Ever in
on
history.
anything in their channel.
And probably ever will, because it had the influence of these beings. And certain things they said in the talk were meant to discredit you, and it was just like unbelievable to see all these different. And I used to confuse me, like why did that? I thought we both thought it was maybe the negative power.
Yeah.
And like working overtime or something.
Working overtime.
But really, they need agents. The negative power needs agents, and we didn't fully realize enough that these beings actually had an interest in this planet and a reason for targeting Vardankar and Vardanus and so forth.
Yeah. Because they saw through the timeline, because they could time travel, they saw that it would prevent the extinction.
I mean, yes, the negative power doesn't always just use aliens, but it seems to be one of the key factors of a lot of obstacles that have happened in the last 2 to 10 years or so.
But now it's coming to the point where people that made errors or mistakes towards Vardankar can do a reversal of the karma to try to change this trajectory that these beings created for this kind of destruction and this kind of major loss, because it's not necessary for there to be a total extinction that way. People can clean up any mess that they made. Because one of the things about this cycle that we're entering, it's sort of like, in Vardankar we don't aim for cosmic consciousness. We aim for self-realization and God realization and mastership. But this is a cosmic consciousness type of cycle, very reminiscent of a film that recently came out. I think it was Aquaman 2. And a big aspect of that has to do with coexisting. There were certain leaders in the past that they traveled to different countries around the world. They built bridges with other people that seemed different than themselves. Maybe they were, from a different culture or a different religion or a different spiritual path or even different, appearance or this or that. But they built bridges with these people, and there was an enormous appreciation for the leaders that have done those building of bridges. Because in this cycle, cosmic consciousness is sort of like, it has to do with coexisting. different paths coexisting, different spiritual paths coexisting, different beings from different races coexisting. And in the film, one of the ways in which they saved the planet from extinction was the two brothers who were supposed to be enemies worked together to stop it.
So it's not about like combining every religion into
one.
It's coexistence and seeing that everyone has a right to their own path and not saying mine is right and yours is wrong.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people do that sometimes and creates wars.
Yeah.
But
some of the people that I've met in almost every path, Christianity, atheism, all different paths, there's sort of like a top 1% who have really put their love and effort and time into their path so that they develop themselves to a higher level or higher degree. And it tends to be those individuals, they tend to not feel insecure. When there's a person who's a Christian who's in that top 1%, when they're more highly developed, they're not worried about, is Vardankar a problem? They're not worried, like, what is Heather, Shaiji doing now? Yeah. They have the inspiration in their own path. Right. But when you have people that are not developing themselves and not putting enough love and their attention is split, which causes a fracture for them on inner levels, then what happens is that they are much more insecure and they find Vardankar threatening because they're not strong enough in their own teachings. And they're not developing themselves enough and unfolding enough in their own teachings. So it brings about a feeling of insecurity.
I think, one of the aspects of coexistence is people have to be comfortable with themselves and their own path. Even if they're not part of a spiritual path or religion, everyone at least would have kind of a centeredness and they're comfortable with themselves.
Yeah.
And, some people are so focused on numbers. They need more numbers in their religion and they need to save people. And it's not the same as using that path to better yourself spiritually. There's two different realities.
Yeah.
And I think the ones who are more sincere in their path are ones who are just comfortable in that path. That's the path for them.
Yeah.
And they're using it for the right reason. But, some people go around and try to intimidate others into their path.
In fact, when people come into a path and they have an animosity and they don't like it, or they're forced to be in something they don't want to be in, that actually makes that path weaker. Mm-hmm. And part of it is because whoever is leading that path is taking on some of the karma and burdens of those who are not ready for it or don't want it. It's actually a detriment, not an advantage. It makes them weaker. And
Vardankar is not all about numbers, even though it's like Paul G's prediction, though there is a kind of a need to reach a critical mass in a sense of sincere seekers, but then those seekers already exist. It's a matter of reaching out to them, but it's not the same as going out and trying to convert people.
Yeah. Part of it is we've had a lot of, because these beings have intervened a lot, we've had a lot of blocks. Our financial systems have been blocked off. Our YouTube channel is blocked. I can't upload any more videos on YouTube anymore. They're literally tricked people into causing their own extinction, which is like trying to keep us from doing what we were destined to do. And this is a detriment. And if they want to prevent the extinction, then some people may want to consider doing a reversal. I mean, a reversal is when somebody makes a mistake that is spiritually immature. They can reverse it by doing the opposite. So if somebody destroyed thousands and thousands of dollars of my equipment, then they could help, by donating. If somebody caused me to be smeared and for people to see me as something that I'm not, then they can do the opposite and show that I am a divine being. If somebody made a mistake and tried to block our YouTube channel, then they can find a way of unblocking it. Things like that.
Yeah, well, many of us have been duped by these alien beings, and they've a lot of people unknowingly have been channels for the Varden or the negative power. I mean, mistakes are mistakes
Yeah.
anyway. It's not about. I don't think everyone has to go back in time and change things that they've done, but reversals, like when something's done towards the Vardenist or Varden Master, it tends to be worse.
Yeah.
So it's in their benefit usually to do kind of reversing for karmic reasons.
One of the things that is significant to know is when an individual, right now this is a cycle of testing, the negative power is like a gigantic filtration system. It filters out those who are unready from those who are ready as a channel for the Varden, this voice of God. And so when somebody commits a transgression, such as they make an error, they listen to a piece of music that is lower astral and harmful, it's like they're giving a part of their consent to the negative to step into their universe. Or if somebody commits a transgression where they attack a Varden Master with their mind by thinking thoughts that the Varden Master is weak and unspiritual and all this nonsense, they're committing a transgression against Divine Spirit. And when we make a lot of these transgressions, I think it was an occultist who said that it's sort of like making a tiny crack that forms in our vase of consciousness. And if we have too many of these cracks, it can cause enormous problems in our spiritual life, or enormous problems in our physical life. And so this is another reason why reversal is important, because sometimes people, they literally hurt themselves in their lower bodies because of all these transgressions and all of these little tiny mistakes or things that are not doing things that are self-destructive causes.
And I imagine it's very tiring to always have to remind people, about this.
Yeah.
Because it's so common for people to trip themselves up over that mistake.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that I learned a long time ago, which helped a lot, was that when you actually commit a transgression against somebody, that you actually become more angry with them, which is really strange.
I've seen that a lot, yeah.
And I learned that from you, and when I did, I was like, wow, that is very strange. So, like, if you have a negative attitude towards someone, or a grudge, or like you're angry with someone, or you attack someone, later on you might be even more annoyed with them, and you won't know why. And you think that they did something wrong. They must have done something wrong to you. They must have done something wrong because you feel this annoyance toward them. It could just be that you committed some transgression toward them.
Yeah.
And it's not usually how we think. We think, if we're annoyed with someone, they must have done something bad to me. It's not really true all the time. It may be sometimes. There's karmic reasons for things. But, forgiveness and also resolving things is just the best way to go, because you don't even, it could be ourselves that did something wrong.
Yeah. Forgiving oneself. Sometimes people feel this unconscious pain or guilt that they hurt somebody. And so the anger that they feel towards that person is their own unconscious guilt.
I think that's the biggest trip that people have, because it's spiritual law that people don't know, and it's spiritual law that's so invisible and isn't really talked about. The first time I heard it was from you in a talk a long time ago, but I never heard anyone else talk about that, like ever.
Yeah. Those who are Chelas and Vardankar are profoundly blessed. If they really, really have gratitude and count their blessings and realize that it is an enormous gift to have this out-of-body to travel, to experience this light and sound, to have inner experiences. And it's sort of like that saying, if we don't appreciate what someone doesn't appreciate, they lose. If somebody doesn't appreciate the blessing of living on this planet, and they take it for granted, and they're just out of control, then they're just throwing things away. If people don't appreciate being in the high path, having the spiritual exercises, having Phobie having myself, having the ancient Vardan masters, then they take it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, there are great things around the corner. I know that that corner doesn't always seem to come, but it's like you have to pass through the storm. But I know that there are amazing things around the corner for Vardankar and in general. But it's like, it's like everyone. We all have to pass through the storm in order to arrive there. But it's a individual thing and a collective thing, and I think for Vardanists, it's kind of whatever you make of it. Vardanists have a lot of freedom, I think, but it's making use of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Not waiting for a new master or stuff like that. Or
It's having the realization that we're blessed here, right now, in this moment, that God is with us now. That when a huge milestone is reached, it's time to celebrate. It's not about just looking into the future. Oh, now is not good enough. What will happen in the future that's so much better? It's realizing that it's happening right now. That when a milestone is reached, it's like a blessing from Hure God, where it just reaches down and gives us what we need. Sometimes the answer is handed to us on a silver platter. And can we accept it? And can we appreciate it? In whatever form God brings it in, whatever package God brings it in, can we recognize that package? It's like that play that I wrote about Plato, Vardan video reading, Alan G and I, about how there was this king that was dressed as a beggar, and he gave a man this crusty black thing. What he didn't realize was that this being was disguised as a beggar, disguised as someone lowly and inconsequential, was actually a king. And that this glob of black crust was actually a diamond. Meaning, people will look in the present moment and not see that God has this great milestone, this great gift. And instead they're looking to the future for something much better, because they're not appreciating what God is giving them right now. They're pushing things into the future because they think, well, Alan G isn't good enough, so someday something good will come. Or Heather G isn't good enough, or Phobie isn't good enough, so someday something good will come. Or something of this nature. That's called pushing things into the future. It was like when I was in the E-group. They couldn't realize that God is here and now. And the milestones that we reach today, if we can celebrate the gift of what we're receiving from the Hure, and from the Vardan, and from the Master, then we can step higher spiritually.
Yeah.
I apologize that this is, again, not a normal talk on Vardankar, that we're talking about something that's a rather unusual topic for us to talk about, but nonetheless it's still important. And it's something that, again, if it's not clear if this is true or not, it's very important to prove it for yourself, meaning the individual can ask these masters, these Vardan masters, or seek the counsel of divine spirit to show them, show me proof if this is true. And if you have patience and persistence, it will be shown to you.
Yeah, and there is a divine timing to things, certainly, but within that, people have a lot of flexibility, or Vardanists at least. There's a lot of flexibility.
Yes.
Service or other things.
Something as simple as sharing links to some of our videos can be healing and helpful. Something as simple as making a small donation so that we can pay for our Vardankar mailing, or for a vitally important project or something of that nature. Something as simple as holding a positive view of reality towards Vardankar, towards the outer master, towards the inner master, towards the ancient masters.
Yeah, Vardanists don't know how much they can actually help and participate in the Vardan by supporting Vardankar in different ways. Like you said, holding a positive vision of Vardankar. You know,
Yes.
it is a reality, but it does sometimes require the help of more Vardanists.
Yeah. A lot of times, some people are not conscious of their thoughts. What are they creating with their thoughts? Are they undermining the high path and the master and the moving forward, or are they helping?
Yeah, some people are getting stuck on who's the next master. They think that's going to help Vardankar, and that's a real trip, because you can help by helping. You know, it's not, we don't need a new master for Vardankar to do well. Everything that we need is here already. It's just a matter of it needs to be manifested in the divine timing. But certain things people can do to help it along.
And sometimes also on in my past life on Planet series, I know I brought this kinds of thing up before, but the reason I'm bringing this up, it was a golden age planet, and one of the problems that some people had was they had this notion of reality that any form of adversity is a sign that is something bad. Adversity was something to be avoided. But they also didn't realize that adversity is also a source of change and spiritual development and unfoldment, acceleration. And so Vardankar we went through this 12-year period of very, very intense adversity. And there are some people that will just interpret adversity as being bad. Just all bad.
Or failure.
That proves that Vardankar has failed, that proves that the master's no good, that proves that this is not right. And really they're not coming from a place of knowingness, that we were actually working out some very severe ancient Atlantean karma, planetary karma.
What's the Kali Yuga?
It's the Kali Yuga.
You can't expect it to be like a golden age, unless we go through a mini golden age, which can happen.
And so again, if individuals did create something that is moving, that is pushing it towards this extinction type of thing, this kind of terrible fate of loss, then they can do something to reverse that. They can do something to reverse the damage that they've done and prove that they can be responsible so that they can be granted, guided to what's right for them next. Which is, on this planet, this sort of cosmic consciousness thing, Petter Zask once said that it's like a caveman jumping and becoming a very highly advanced doctor. It's like a huge, massive leap in, I don't know, call it evolution, but consciousness. And people that are irresponsible with the power, wielding the power wields them. I was given an example of this from the WW film where I was told by Divine Spirit, even though it's just a silly film, I was told by Divine Spirit that the character who represented this cat person was granted all of this enormous power. And I was told inwardly that is symbolic of some of the people today who have suddenly been granted all this power in the form of technology and in the form of psychic magic and things like this. But she was the power was controlling her. She wasn't controlling the power. And because of that, she became extremely destructive, because she was having a blast. She was really getting off and having all this power. She could beat people up and everything like that and abuse them. And it was giving her this adrenaline rush. But I was told inwardly that that character represents some people today. They're being given all this power in the form of technology and psychic stuff and reading people's minds and things like this. And then what's happening is the negative power is just watching them destroy other people and destroy themselves.
Well, yeah, and who's giving them those weapons is probably the ones that want to inherit the planet. It's probably the same beings, most likely.
One of the things that I forgot to add is that there's a sense that some ETs, because of this whole so-called awakening thing, which is really a lot of times astral level or causal awakening and so forth, which is a milestone. People who actually make it, beings who actually make it to this cosmic consciousness phase, they're usually not the kind of people that are into condemning people for mistakes if the person has sincerity in their heart and they choose to be responsible in the present moment. And they're usually not into judging people by their outer costume, their body form, because they can see through things. So it's different than what some people expect or understand. And they choose to be responsible in the present moment. Sorry.
And because they know if people are given power before they're ready for it, then they're going to destroy themselves.
Well, part of it is it's a test. Because ancient Atlantis, people were given certain gifts and power and toys, technology, and they just blew themselves up. I mean, well, not blew, just destroyed in water, basically, but it don't have to have that same faith. People can show that they can be responsible with the power instead, that they can be spiritually mature adults and wield great power with great wisdom and great love and great compassion. If somebody has this belief that they can just receive enormous power and gifts from the universe without being responsible, eventually they're going to find out, like a lot of the people that I've known in past lives, that they're going to have to clean up their mess, like with a gigantic cosmic vacuum cleaner. which is not fun, because I've seen that happen many times. You know, my husband in spirit in past lives was a warlord. Aside from being an amazing Vardan master, a warlord, massive spaceships, and he would blow things up. And he had to spend thousands and thousands of years cleaning up his own mess and mistakes, and sometimes suffering enormously. So, I mean, he didn't earn more great things. He earned, you know, the causes and effects that he created. He had to live within those, and it wasn't fun.
Well, I feel it's a very important talk, and I hope it reaches a lot of people.
I hope we can even put it on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll manage to get it on YouTube. This one will go up.
So thank you, Sean, for sharing insights from the Vardan that are healing and helpful and divine. And I thank everyone for listening. And please share the link to this video so other people can find it and possibly help in any way they're guided by divine spirit, or to do a reversal if they caused some kind of harm. And if individuals feel guided to help Vardankar so that we can reach this goal, especially Chielas, to reach this important goal, one can help and seek inner guidance as to how that can be done. Total extinction, everybody loses everything like people lost in Atlantis, can be prevented. It is by reversing the damage done towards Vardankar to counteract and stop this extinction event from happening on Earth.
You can also find us on our new BitChute channel.
Yeah.
Apart from YouTube. So.
Thank you. May the
Thank you. May the blessings be.
May the blessings be. May the blessings be.